Hey, what's up? My name's Samuel Leeds and I'm a property investor, and I am this week going to be answering all of your niggly property questions. Now I'm going to answer them, and I'm going to do the same thing next week. So if you want me to answer your questions, comment them below to this video, anything property related, and I'll do my best to answer that next week. So this week, what do we got? So we've got some really interesting questions from the other week. Mo Rafiq said, Samuel, great work as usual. Boom, thanks man. Would you look at leaseholds when considering a lease option agreement, or is it strictly freeholds? Okay, so the difference between a leasehold property and a freehold property: freehold, you're buying the property and you're also buying the land that the property sits on. Leasehold, you're not buying the land. You're actually, although you're buying the property, the land, technically it's leased, so you don't own it, you're just renting it. And what I would say is, don't buy leasehold property unless, number one, there's a lot of years left on the lease. If the lease is gonna run out in your lifetime, maybe if you're a bit older, even in your kid's lifetime, then don't buy it. So if I'm buying a leasehold property, I want it to be like maybe 99 years left on the lease or more. If there's 40 years left on the lease, it's just not gonna work. Also as well, that when you buy a leasehold property, well, you will have to pay a peppercorn service charge, ground rent. So just make sure that's really small, and just check the legalities on that with your solicitor before you buy a leasehold property. However, if you're making money on it and the lease is really long and it's going to far outlive you and maybe even your children, then I wouldn't say don't ever buy a leasehold property. You know, if you're still making money on it, you're still buying, it can be good. So it's the same. If you're doing a lease option agreement, it's the same story. What I would say is I favor freeholds, but if you're gonna be doing a lease option on a leasehold, and you're gonna be making money, as long as my solicitor's happy and I'm making money, I'm happy. So that's kind of my answer, really. I hope that helps. Hythe says, I have a plan and was wondering if you could let me know if this is a good plan or not. Okay, so I'm looking to join the armed forces, but would like to save up a deposit for a buy-to-let mortgage on a 2-bedroom house. After a few years of owning the property and renting it out, I'd like to refinance the property and take out the equity, and then use that money to buy a second property for either myself or to rent out. Your video is really helpful, thanks in advance. Okay, thanks, great question. What I would say is your plan is not great. It's not great because you're relying on the house going up in value just over time with capital appreciation, which is not a dead cert. You're just hoping that it is. So this strategy that you're saying is what a lot of people do accidentally. So they'll buy a house for 100 grand, and then a few years later, it's now gone up, it's now worth 130, and they go, oh, nice. And then they just get a new mortgage on it, they pull out their equity, and then they buy another house. And that works organically, almost accidentally, and people do that. However, if you're saying that that's your plan A, and you're just relying on the capital appreciation, it's not really a great plan because it might not happen. And it's also really slow, so it's just gonna take years. What I would probably say would be better is if you buy a house and then you buy it knowing that there's a problem with the house, then you can solve that problem and add value straight away. So let's just say that it could even just be that it's not in good condition. It could be that you buy the house for, instead of buying it for 100, you buy it for 80 grand, but there's no kitchen and bathroom in the house, so it's unmortgageable. So you buy it on a short-term bridging loan, you get a nice kitchen, a nice bathroom, you add value, and then you refinance it quicker because you've brought the value up. That probably does take more education, more knowledge to do that, but you're in control. You're not just relying on the economy going up. So I'd probably look at getting some good education and speed the process up. But however, just buying a house that makes money and doing it the slow way, that's not bad. It just could be a lot better. Thanks, man. I appreciate your question. Mark Keenan says, how do you keep your return on investment on a buy-to-let after your initial low-rate mortgage goes up? Do you remortgage and keep doing it every 2 or 5 years? Okay, so you're assuming that the interest rates are always going up. They're not. Sometimes they go down, sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down. At the moment, interest rates are they've gone up a little bit recently, but they're pretty low still, so they probably will go up in time. But what I find is that my return on investment usually, as year on happens, normally my return on investment goes up because rents go up. And you can fix interest rates, and yeah, you can refinance. Of course, after a few years, you go from a fixed rate onto a variable, and then the variable's high, and you're like, oh man, yeah, absolutely, just fix again and get a new mortgage. Or if you've got equity in the property, get a mortgage and pull that equity out. Billion%. But generally speaking, every year or two, you're going to have a little rent increase as well, which is going to mean that your ROI is going up. So it just depends. How do you track it? Every year, just have a spreadsheet. Every year or even every month, just put in what were your expenses that month on the property, and what was your profit that month on the property. It's a business. Do a profit and loss sheet. Check it out. Check it's okay. And yeah, so I hope that helps. I wouldn't overthink it. And don't forget to do rent reviews with your properties as well as interest payment reviews as well. Next, excellent advice. I've been interested in properties since I watched Property Development Abroad about 10 years ago. Life took a swing. Want to get into it now. I like the sound of lease option agreements. Am I right in that to start one, the required payment are as follows? Okay, so if you're going to be doing a lease option agreement, you need 1, solicitor fees, 2, monthly payment to the person we buy the property off. That's it. Then we rent it out as multi-rents. Steve. Kind of. So solicitor fees, yes, when you do a lease option agreement, you're going to need to pay solicitor fees, and that's usually around about £750 to £1,000. The monthly payments to the person you buy the property off, that's not an upfront payment though. That's like, you're going to get a tenant and you're going to pay them monthly. So that's just an ongoing cost. So the costs up front are solicitor fees. Also, if you're going to need to do any work to the property, or if you're turning it into a HMO, you're going to need to obviously budget for furniture, any works to the property. The seller might require an upfront fee as well. In fact, sometimes it's just £1, but you'll always need to pay something. It could be just £1, or it could be £1,000, depends on what you negotiate. So basically with a lease option agreement, it's the same as buying a house, but you just don't pay the deposit. So you won't pay any deposit up front, which is the big chunk of money. You might still, everything else, survey for instance, I would still recommend getting a survey on the property, because just because it's a free house doesn't mean that it's a good house. So, checks on it, survey, solicitor fees, you'll need to pay. But it's nominal, right? It might be like a few £1,000s, and for a house, for a few £1,000s is not bad. I'll do one more quick one. Simpsons, great advice from Grant Cardone. Yeah, Grant is a beast, and I've loved meeting him and learning from him. I'd love to see you get one-to-one advice from Tony Robbins. He charges £1 million, or Richard Bandler. What do you think? Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do some training with Tony Robbins. I mean, £1 million. I know Tony charges £1 million for a one-on-one session. Jeez, I mean, you're even stretching my brain now. I mean, I paid 100,000 for Grant Cardone, and I actually paid Grant 200,000 because I'm doing some other stuff and some of his training. $1 million. Jeez, it's crazy because I spend all this money on all these mentors, and then I teach you the stuff for free. So I hope you appreciate it. Subscribe, share the video, drop your questions below as well, your questions and comments, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much.